Hollywood movie studios rely heavily on reboots, sequels, and franchise reimaginings. So you'd think at this point they'd have this entire thing down to a science, but every now and again a film comes out utilizing an existing IP that is so embarrassing in the way it tries setting things modern that it just makes you infuriated. That is why I fucking hated the new Shaft.
What is wrong with you?
You picked up a bat.
You can't beat up a woman.
Why not?
Because she's a woman. That's like misogynistic.
You the one being misogynistic. I ain't mentioned her gender.
Okay.
I'm an equal opportunity ass woman.
I really dislike the new Shaft, directed by Tim Story, co-written by Kenya Barris of the TV show Blackish. Couldn't stand the movie. It's probably one of the worst movies I've seen this year. Maybe the worst movie I've seen this year. And I know you guys know that I just reviewed Loquisha, so I hope that's saying something. Before we get into why I can't stand the new Shaft, I'm going to talk a little bit about Shaft in general. This week I went back and revisited a few of the older Shaft movies. There's like a bunch. Shaft is of course based on Ernest Tideman's book Shaft and the series of novels thereafter. John Shaft is a private eye in New York from the 1970s who ended up becoming kind of a blaxploitation icon when Gordon Parks directed the Shaft movie in 1971, starring Richard Roundtree as Shaft. And then they made other movies as well. There was Shaft's Big Score, which Gordon Parks came back for, which is like a bigger budgeted sequel that has like more money and slightly better, I guess, formally, but is not quite as good as the original Shaft. And there was Shaft in Africa. And then there was a short-lived like Shaft TV series. I couldn't get my hands on that to revisit those, but there's like 7 episodes of that. And then basically nothing for a very long time. I like the books, I guess, still exist. It still existed. And then back in 2000, RIP, John Singleton directed sort of a reboot of Shaft, starring Samuel L. Jackson as the titular character. But Sam Jackson's not really playing John Shaft from the books as Richard Roundtree played him in the films from the 70s. Sam Jackson was playing John Shaft's nephew, who is also named John Shaft. And that movie is different stylistically than the earlier films from the 70s, but is also, I think, pretty heavily underrated. We're going to talk about that a little more in a second. But the basic gist is that John Shaft is sort of an iconic, I think, black pop cultural figure. When I first told people I really hated the new Shaft earlier in the week after I got out of a press screening, like multiple people told me, you know, sort of, why do you care? Like, Shaft has always been a joke. Like, what does it matter? And I'm like, Shaft wasn't always a joke. I mean, I know that over the years, Shaft has become like sort of pop cultural shorthand for like black movie characters and stuff. So like obviously, you know, Shaft's been used in like commercials and things like that, and especially the Sam Jackson Shaft kind of shifted the character in people's eyes into being kind of like one note, I think. But that's not really what the character started out as, I don't think. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like, you know, Shaft was some sort of like towering literary hero or something, but if you watch the first Shaft movie that Gordon Parks directed, it's pretty fucking good. It's not perfect. Obviously, a lot of films from the blaxploitation era have different issues and problems. The Shaft films in particular kind of suffer from like pacing issues, particularly Shaft's Big Score. That is like a weirdly slow movie. It's absurd how glacial the pace is. But when you watch those stories, they're basically a very interesting mix of, you know, private eye detective fiction like noir, with like blaxploitation flavoring and aesthetic, but also like they're supposed to kind of compete with like the James Bond books and then later the James Bond movies on some level, but like on a much smaller scale. The Luke Cage show that everyone seemed to like that I didn't stand, very heavily owes a lot of its, you know, the comics as well, its debt to Shaft. The character itself, John Shaft, as Richard Roundtree plays him, is this very surly, very clever, smart-mouthed private eye, who works outside the system, who doesn't like playing well with the cops because you can't fucking trust cops, obviously. And he typically goes in some kind of like the typical sort of stories that private eyes go through, like either there's a mystery to solve, or one of his friends has died, or like he's caught between two gangs and stuff. Like it's very, very, you know, not groundbreaking material. What was groundbreaking about it was that Gordon Parks was able to, you know, one, exert his, you know, unique filming style. Like he was such a brilliant photographer, and be able to translate that to movies and to create these like really interesting shots and really iconic visuals. And he's able to kind of meld that to a story that actually has like something to say. You know what I mean? It's not like the deepest artistic film or anything like that. Obviously, if you watch the original Shaft, it's palpable the sense that, you know, John Shaft has to work outside of this corrupt system. He couldn't just be a cop, because if he was a cop, like he would have to do all this red tape and bullshit and racism and just all this, you know, corruption. But on the outside, he can actually get some things done, but he still has to like toe this line. Like he can he can like tell the cops to go fuck themselves up to a point, but then there's a point. You know, even this guy who's like a sort of like a rebel hero is shackled to some extent. And when you watch the films, like, even though this stuff is not like heavily in the forefront, it's definitely there and it's definitely palpable and it matters. It's part of what I think makes the movie special. Shaft's big score is a little bit less so, and then I couldn't even get my hands on Shaft in Africa, so I think that one's supposed to be a little more like almost like a Roger Moore Bond movie, but with Shaft. I don't know. And I couldn't watch the TV series either. But John Singleton's version was very different. When I was younger and I first watched the John Singleton Shaft, I thought it was cool because I like Sam Jackson and it's a cool movie. But it's like so. It's a movie that echoes the ethos of blaxploitation films, but it is made by a major studio in the year 2000, so it's very glossy. There's like a really heavy, slick sheen about the entire movie that kind of makes it feel sanitized, even though it's not. Like, it's still rated R, there's still like violence and cursing, and the film still heavily deals with like racial injustice. And Sam Jackson's performance is largely pretty straight. He has little like one-liners and catchphrases and stuff like that, but it's a pretty straight performance. And the cast is amazing. If you've never seen the film, Jeffrey Wright of Westworld fame, back then I only knew him as Basquiat, plays Peoples Hernandez, like this like really, really great like local kingpin character. He's like mind-blowing in the movie. And fucking Christian Bale plays one of the other villains, who's just this stuck-up white dude who gets away with murder for killing Mekhi Phifer, and Sam Jackson tries to bring them both down. It's a very strong movie. Singleton and screenwriter Shane Salerno came up with the story together, and then crime novelist Richard Price of Clockers fame rewrote much of the script, and it's very strong as a crime fiction piece. I remember when I was younger, I thought I hadn't seen the original Shaft really, and I just sort of thought all blaxploitation movies were like Sweetback's Badass Song, because I was dumb. And watching the 2000 Shaft, I remember thinking it felt really like safe. Like, I remember thinking like, it's just so sexless, you know? Like, in the opening sequence to the 2000 Shaft, there's like a montage in the credits of what is implied to be Sam Jackson fucking somebody, but it's like obviously not actually Sam Jackson's physical body. And I remember thinking, like, outside of that, there's a couple of references to him hooking up with women, but it seems weird that the movie, like, kind of shies away from that altogether. And as I got older, I just figured, you know what? Most people don't really want to think about Sam Jackson having sex. That's probably why they did that. John Singleton was doing us a favor. Cut to now. And, you know, Warner Brothers got the rights back to the Shaft character or whatever, and I think Netflix co-produced this project. And, you know, we have an opportunity to bring the Shaft character to a new era. And what I assume you would do is just get one of the many vastly talented and charismatic and good-looking black men working in Hollywood to just play John Shaft. Just make him a private eye working in 2019 and just talk about how racism is today and how that relates to the crime fiction genre and action and stuff. Like, it's not fucking rocket science. There's so many talented black men in Hollywood who would kill for a role, a meaty role like this. You just give it to them and make it a starring vehicle for them. And then you could have cameos from Sam Jackson, Richard Roundtree if you want to. And then you just make a whole new movie. And you get somebody cool to direct it and someone cool to write it. This is, like, pretty straightforward, right? Wrong! That is not the direction Warner Brothers decided to go in. Instead, they decided to treat this new movie like the pilot for a TV show no one's ever going to fucking watch. Instead of introducing the world to a new Shaft, whether that's someone related to the other Shafts in the films or just a brand new character, start from scratch or whatever, they introduce us to Jesse Usher's J.J. Shaft, John Shaft Jr., who was the son of Sam Jackson Shaft from the 2000 film that the movie retcons as having been abandoned by him. So basically, the movie changes the historical narrative of the other Shaft movies and forces them into like a corrective timeline, which no one needed. And it establishes that when we met Shaft in 2000, he had already been a deadbeat dad for like 6 or 7 years. Gross. And then also that he's not the original Shaft's nephew. He is the original Shaft's son, and that Shaft's such a piece of shit that he pretended to be his uncle the whole time because he didn't want to be a father. I know that people joke about how most modern movies like really heavily deal in dad issues, but like, holy shit, no one needed this. This is like in Superman Returns. They're like, what if Superman was like a deadbeat dad? What if he like went to space and didn't know he had a son and made James Marsden raise him? Who cares? Who wants to see that in a movie? Nobody. But again, whatever. Those are decisions you could work around if the story you're telling ends up being worthwhile and interesting, right? It's not at all JJ is such an insufferable character. He's such a, like, boring, weird, like, loser. Like, you can kind of tell they kind of thought, oh, we're going to write, like, the Miles Morales Spider-Man of Shaft. He's going to be young and, like, hip, and he knows how to use computers and smartphones. He's a data analyst for the FBI, and he's not like his dad, because his dad wasn't around. Why would he be? He's not like his grandfather, because he never fucking met him. And he's just like a guy. He's like a young black guy who was like a geek, and he's not good at talking to women, and he, you know, he's, I don't know. I mean, I guess he's what angry YouTube commenters would call a cuck. What makes the film so frustrating is that if it was focusing on Jesse and tried to tell like a newer version of a Shaft story, where maybe he's not like the old Shaft paradigm, where he's not like a tough-talking private eye who like punches people and stuff. I mean, even the 2000 version, they altered it to where Shaft was a cop who then became a private eye, so he had more of an arc. Like, maybe they're just going to do the modern version of that. I'm like, I'll give it a chance. That's not where it goes, though. Instead, the story follows JJ is like one of his childhood friend dies of like a apparent drug overdose. Because it's a movie, he's like, my friend did an overdose, it must be murder, I'm going to solve his murder. But then he has to start like interrogating people in the streets, and he's never been to the streets, because he's from the suburbs. He's just a soft millennial who doesn't know how to fight. So he has to get his dad's help, and then we meet Sam Jackson Shaft again, only he's like a completely different character, and he fucking sucks. Like, the original Shaft is like actually a pretty exciting character, and then like the Sam Jackson Shaft is like in a similar wheelhouse, just different, just more tailored to the way Sam Jackson portrays coolness versus the way Roundtree did it, like, you know, in the 70s. Now Shaft comes back and he's just like a horny old man. Like, going back to my thing about how, I thought the Shaft was kind of sexless. It's almost like someone heard that complaint of mine and then took that as the only note. So every scene is just him talking about pussy. I don't want to think about Sam Jackson fucking. Like, I know that Sam Jackson fucks, and that's fine. I don't need to know about it. No reason to bring me into this. So, of course, it becomes this, like, father and son thing, right? It's like, I need my dad's help to solve a mystery, because my dad solves mysteries, it'll be great. My dad's cool and punches people, he'll kind of protect me in the streets. Which would be fine, except that then it means the rest of the movie, from the moment Sam Jackson shows up, is just, like, boomer jokes about how millennials are gay and lame. Just every scene is just him asking his son if he's gay, him asking his son if he's sure he likes pussy, him being mad that his son drinks coconut water and wears skinny jeans, him being mad that he'd be on that phone, and then just like a repeat of the other stuff. Just kind of, it just keeps cycling back to like, you sure you're not gay? You sure you like pussy? I don't know about you guys, but like, I don't need to go see a Shaft movie that's just like a black uncle like shaming young people. I could go anywhere in the city to a corner and just experience that for free. Like, if I just wanted to hear like an older black man like, you know, impugn my entire generation's masculinity for hours, I could just like ride the train. I'd run into one. I guarantee you it would not be difficult. To reduce the entire movie to that, like, okay, if you haven't seen the movie, you probably think I'm like exaggerating. They're like, no, there's got to be still a plot, and they have to like go after suspects and things like that, and like they do. I'm not going to pretend this stuff doesn't happen, but this is the main show. It's very clear that director Tim Story and the writers were like, this is what they were focused on, was the relationship between father and son, which is shitty and sucks. So then the actual plot beneath that, where they're trying to figure out who murdered his friend and stuff, that part's like okay. If the movie was just that, it would be like decent. But then that part also goes into like weird Islamophobia and stuff, because there's like this terrorist subplot, and just every scene finds a way to be either homophobic or transphobic or like weirdly racist towards like other races. And I'm not talking about like reverse racism, like they make fun of white people. Actually, for a Shaft movie, there's very, very little criticism of the white establishment, which is odd, because that's like a heavy thing in the Shaft movies. Like, it really kind of deals with like, you know, how white people are and everything, and how they're awful. And this movie doesn't really do that. It's really about the problem as young people. Like, somehow the makers of this film thought like Shaft, a character who always is fighting the establishment, should instead be shaming the youth. That's what the character should be about now. What's irritating is that if the film was building up to some kind of crescendo where you realize that Shaft doesn't know his son at all and is underestimating his son, and then like the movie shows his son opportunities to show how even though he's different, his approach is different than his father's, it's still effective. It doesn't really do that. He's actually as inept and weak-willed as everyone assumes he is. He's really annoying and not likable. Like, you don't like listening to Sam Jackson say all this shit about millennials, but you also don't feel like it's wrong to say these things about his son, because his son's just irritating little shit. You don't like him, you don't really root for him. Like, you only root for him in the sense that you don't like his dad. I think what really frustrated me too, though, is they also give him like all these weird mixed signals. Like, they try to give him moments where he's a badass, even though it goes against what he said. It's like, oh, he can't fight, so he gets his ass beat in the streets in several scenes. Then he gets into a fight in the club, and like, Eddie Gordo moves all these guys and explains that he was taught capoeira as a young age. So it's like, he knows capoeira, but only when he's drunk. So it's like a drunken capoeira master, which is an odd thing to be. But it's like, they give him a moment to be badass to fight off multiple guys. Then they undercut it by saying his mom taught him dance fighting as a kid. And then they kind of come back to be... It's like, if he knows capoeira, why doesn't he fucking fight anyone else in the movie using capoeira, right? Or like, later, he keeps talking about how he doesn't like guns. His mother had an issue with guns and stuff. And here he is, he doesn't carry a gun. And then the first scene where he has to shoot a gun, he's like a fucking expert marksman. And it's like, oh, you like guns, but I don't have to use them, and that kind of thing. And it's just like, I don't know what you guys are going for here. You're just making him seem like an inconsistent weirdo. He has no real values. He's just like a sad dude who never had a dad. And like, you can do things with that. I mean, I feel like the entirety of the show Lost is just sad dudes who didn't have dads around or whatever, but like, this is just a mess. What makes it more offensive too is like, Regina Hall is in the film as JJ's mom. She's like an amazing actress. She had a great year last year. She was fucking killer in Support the Girls. If you guys haven't seen Support the Girls, directed by my boy Mumblecore Poppy, Andrew Bielski, you should definitely check that movie out. It's really fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of all time at this point. And it makes me sad that she went from that to like this, to just being like a sort of stereotypical stand-in for like a single mom. It's really offensive. It's just everything in the movie is just like gross. Trying to make this video, I had to rack my brain to think about things that I liked about the movie. And I guess I can give it the fact that Tim Story is like a competent enough director to where like the action's pretty coherent, like there's decent geography. Some of the sequences look okay. The final set piece has like a couple of fun moments, I guess. When Richard Roundtree does show up, it's immediately better because he's still really cool, even though he's like old as hell. But everything else is garbage. Like, I guess they had the opportunity to use like unused Isaac Hayes music from the first film, and they don't. The score sucks. It just has a mixture of like modern like trap music and then random throwback songs that are like not even all things that are throwback things that Sam Jackson's character would be into, but like it just sort of falls in the umbrella of like old head stuff. Like, there's just certain songs where I'm like, okay, I get that he would be into this old R&B song because of his age, but to pretend he would like also really be a proponent of like early 90s hip hop is odd, because like I feel like really old heads, it's not like they were like super into that shit later. It's just this like, it's all of the worst sort of respectability politics, like Uncle Pull Your Pants Up stuff and Luke Cage that I didn't like, the Netflix show, but a million times worse because there are no other redeeming qualities, and it's embarrassing. I get that people don't understand why I'm frustrated by it, and like, who cares? It's like, okay, they turned Shaft into a shitty comedy, like, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that it's not like we have a whole ton of interesting black pop cultural figures, you know what I mean, that are big enough to get reboots and franchising and sequels and stuff. Like, we don't have a ton of that. We just don't. Everyone's really stoked about Black Panther, but that's owned by Disney, and it's a superhero, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of other characters like this. You know, white people have like James Bond and like fucking all these other big characters. They get Ethan Hunt. You know, we got John Shaft, and we've had John Shaft since the fucking 1970s. He's a cool character, and you could do interesting, relevant things with him today. You could do a story that features, you know, excitement and drama and intrigue and thrills, and like as an entertaining like summer movie. But you could also have it say something. Like, there's so many young black filmmakers who would love to have the opportunity to make a Shaft movie and make it their own and make it modern and make it like for our generation. And it's insulting to me that they got the fucking guy that directed Barbershop to make one and turn it into like this bullshit, you know? The thing is, it didn't have to be a Shaft movie. If they wanted to tell this story of like a shitty millennial and his like cool boomer dad and then his grandfather or whatever, They could have just made this a movie about like regular ass cops or something. And Sam Jackson could play the same character as a parody of his performance in Shaft, because that's all this is. And audiences would like get it. Like in trailers, you could make references to the old Shaft, and they would get that it was like a pastiche, and it would probably, you know, make $25 million opening weekend and do well on home video or whatever. And that'd be fine. It would, because it would just be its own thing. You know, it would just be like a ride along type movie. Another thing Tim Story did. Instead, they actually branded this with Shaft and made it a Shaft thing, and that's it, basically. I mean, at this point now, if you want like a new Shaft, you're probably not going to get one for like years, you know? Because either this movie will do really well this weekend, and then they're going to make another one in the same vein, which fucking no thanks, or this will fail, and then no one's going to want to do anything with the character or property for like a while. You know, it'll have to cool off. Either one of those outcomes is bad. So it's like, on the one hand, I want to say, don't go see Shaft, right? And then that's going to mean I'm never going to get a new Shaft movie, which I'm kind of okay with, or at least not going to get one for a very long time. Or I could say, hey, go see Shaft anyway, who cares? And then I'll have to watch another one like this later. Like, I might get assigned that because I'm a film critic and I'm an idiot. The truth is, I'm personally just really fucking sick of movies that leverage their comedy as punching down like this. Like, these things aren't even jokes. There's just stuff in the movie that are not jokes. They're not comedic set pieces or sequences. They're just pointing at young people and being like, fuck y'all, basically. And I don't understand the purpose of that. I don't know who that's for. I saw it in an audience full of, like, aunties and uncles, and, like, they were really into it, and they cackled at every scene. Anything that, like, maligned gay, young, or trans people, they were like, hell yeah, which is just insulting and gross. But I don't understand that. I don't understand why you can't make comedy that, if you wanted to turn Shaft into a comedy, why you couldn't make the butt of the humor, like, things that are actually, like, impacting us as a people, you know? It's just pathetic. And, like, Tim Story's a grown-ass man. The writers of this movie are grown-ass men. Everyone involved with this process are fucking adults with brains. And any one of them should have been able to look at this and go, this is not what the culture needs right now. This is a waste. But none of them did. You know, I famously on this channel watched every Medea movie back-to-back and watched all of them, made a video about it. And honestly, as much as people like to use Tyler Perry as shorthand for shitty black movies, we need to talk about movies like this, like Shaft. Movies that just are regressive and don't push things forward and just like leave people behind and refuse to acknowledge that time passes on and that things are different now. I genuinely think this is worse than any Medea movie. And if you guys like Shaft, you like Sam Jackson, you want to go see like a fun action comedy, have at it. But there's any number of other movies you could watch that are better, that do this kind of thing but better. Any other movie. Please see one of those. So yeah, that's it for me on Shaft. I hate it. Please don't see it. Please don't make another one happen. You can watch anything else. You can go back and watch the John Singleton Shaft, man. It's really underrated. I think a lot of people, if you haven't seen it, you really like it. Watch the original. It's not what you probably remember it as if you've ever seen it at all, if you actually know the film and not just through pop cultural osmosis. So either of those are better uses of your time this weekend. Anything. Alright, well, thanks guys. If you like this video, hit the little thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you have subscribed, hit the little notification bell so you can be updated the minute I put out new videos. So, like, if you're in a car driving somewhere, you could, like, pull off to the side of the road and listen to me talk about, like, Wonder Woman or something. So, yeah. Thanks!